Dr. Rajat Ray is going to talk on role of capgolling in ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome management. And I'd like to introduce him. Dr. Rajat Ray is the director of Ray Hospital and Test to Baby Center, Rourkela. He is attached as an assistant professor in High Tech Medical College. Dr. Ray specializes in IVF and ICSI, has trained in advanced embryology from Singapore. He's obtained his diploma in gynec endoscopy from France, and he's and Donald diploma in ultrasound. He has presented papers at many national conferences, and he's been the organizing secretary for ISAR in 2008 and 2013. Sir, please.
I'm going to start this session with blessings from Lord Jagannath from my place. During the past decade, there was an explosion in the number of COH cycles worldwide, both for IVF and ICSI injection and ovulation induction for ovulatory infertility. This tremendous increase in the number of cycles worldwide was associated with a global increase in the number of complications of COH, and in particular, ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome or OHSS. OHSS is an iatrogenic, serious and potential fatal complication of ovarian stimulation, affecting 1 to 14% of all IVF ICSI cycles. The risk factors, as you all know, are young age, the development of many ovarian follicles under stimulation, extreme elevated serum estradiol concentrations, the use of SCG for final oocyte maturation and release, the continued use of SCG for luteal support, and obviously the occurrence of a pregnancy which aggravates it. It may be mild, moderate or severe. The symptoms are mild distension and soreness, nausea, vomiting and ovarian enlargement 5 to 12 centimeters. Moderate visible ascites on ultrasound, and severe clinical signs of tense ascites, hydrothorax, shortness of breath, hemoconcentration, hypercoagulability or any complication of OHSS such as renal failure, thromboembolism or ARDS. OHSS can present in early form, which is related to ovarian response and exogenous human SCG, which is called early OHSS. It is detected 3 to 9 days after SCG administration, and a late form, which I already said, which is due to endogenous SCG due to the occurrence of pregnancy and is diagnosed 10 to 17 days later. All this leads to a cancellation of IVF cycle, prolonged bed rest or hospitalization, and all of which have a significant emotional, social and economic consequences. So the importance of preventing OHSS. These are the few steps, strategies we take to prevent ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, like cycle cancellation, posting, intravenous albumin administration around the time of oocyte retrieval, GnRH agonist as an oocyte trigger and GnRH antagonist cycles, natural cycle IVF, in vitro oocyte maturation and cryopreservation. Unfortunately, none of these strategies currently employed completely prevents OHSS after SCG administration, which I have seen our day-to-day clinical practice. Treatment is mostly symptomatic and expectant apart from paracentesis with replacement of depleted albumin and correction of electrolyte imbalance. So research is directed toward the pathogenesis of OHSS in the last decade, hoping that this can lead to an effective preventive measure. In OHSS, the ovaries are the site of significant stromal edema with bilateral cystic ovarian enlargement. The ascitic fluid accumulation was suggested to be due to increased capillary permeability, which results in fluid shift from intravascular to extravascular compartment. The exact etiology of OHSS is not clear, and several biochemical markers are considered to be possible mediators. There has been an accumulation of evidence showing that VEGF or vascular endothelial growth factor is responsible for the development of this syndrome. Because SCG has no vasoactive activity, VEGF is the most important mediator of SCG dependent ovarian angiogenesis. It is known that VEGF is expressed in human ovaries and that VEGF mRNA levels increase after SCG administration in granulosa cells, whereas elevated levels of secreted proteins are detected in serum, plasma and peritoneal fluids in women at risk or with OHSS. VEGF stimulates new blood vessel development and vascular hyperpermeability by interacting with its VEGF receptor type 2. The study by Abu et al. Verified an increase in total follicular production of VEGF that accounted for elevated serum levels of VEGF, which was associated with the development of OHSS. Gomez et al. Reported that VEGF receptor activation induces vascular permeability in hyperstimulated rats. This effect is prevented by receptor blockade. So, cabergoline has been thought of. Cabergoline decreases the phosphorylation of VEGF receptor type 2. Animal studies have demonstrated that the expression of gene for tyrosine hydroxylase enzyme, which is the rate limiting enzyme in dopamine synthesis, is significantly lower in rats with overstimulated ovaries. So, high VEGF expression and activity in OHS seem to be associated with reduced dopamine production. So, cabergoline, which is a dopamine agonist, is significantly reduced VEGFR2 dependent vascular permeability with OHS. Moreover, serum levels of progesterone and rates of luteal apoptosis remain unchanged, suggesting the absence of a luteolytic effect of cabergoline. But there is concern about the effect of cabergoline on endometrial angiogenesis and its impact on implantation and miscarriage rate, though it prevents OHSS to a certain extent. In addition, there is a lack of reliable evidence on long-term effects on the babies born and general lack of safety data. Several studies have been published which have found no difference in clinical pregnancy rates and miscarriage rates between the groups which have used cabergoline and which has not used cabergoline, which may mean that endometrial angiogenesis is not affected. There are 2 RCTs followed the women up to the end of pregnancy and found no difference in the live birth rate between both treatment groups. Regarding the long-term efficacy, 3 non-randomized studies that did evaluate long-term effects of cabergoline. In one study, they have studied 226 pregnancies occurring in 205 women who had been exposed to cabergoline. They did a follow-up of 204 pregnancies. They concluded that there was no increase in miscarriage rate, that the distribution of birth weights sex ratio was within the expected range, and that there was no increased rate of congenital malformations. The study by Robert Taylor long back in 1996. The second study by Paragini et al., they have collected data on 61 pregnancies in 50 women who had been treated with cabergoline for hyperprolactinemia. Again, they have found that the frequency of spontaneous and induced abortions and major congenital malformations was comparable with the rates in general population. More recently, Alvarez et al. In 2007, they found implantation rates were comparable between the groups and there were no difference in live births per cycle. No minor or major malformation had been observed in any of the babies born. So, it is a safe drug for pregnancy. Again, low dose cabergoline seemed to be a safe treatment for hyperprolactinemia patients, which is given for a long time. But for OHSS, what dose you use is a much lower dose used over a shorter period of time, and the risk of cardiac valvulopathy, which is seen in use of higher doses in Parkinsonism, is likely to be negligible. Another study compared early OHSS with late OHSS. Cabergoline decreased the risk of early OHSS significantly, but the risk of late onset OHSS was not decreased. There was no significant difference between the two groups in terms of pregnancy, implantation, or miscarriage rates. We had a small study. We took 18 patients over a period of 2 years. We included the high-risk patients, which were defined as young females less than 33 years who had polycystic ovaries on ultrasound scan under polycystic ovarian syndrome as defined by Rotterdam criteria, serum estradiol of more than 3,500 picogram per ml on day of SCG. Patients were divided equally into an intervention and a control group. The intervention group were treated with cabergoline 1 milligram every other day, alternated for 8 days, commencing from the day of ovum pickup. The control group did not receive cabergoline and their OHSS, if occurred, were managed conservatively after hospital admission. The rates of OHSS occurrence was compared. There was no significant difference between the two groups in terms of age, body mass index, infertility duration, type and cause of infertility, serum levels of FSH and LH and PCOS. Moreover, there is no significant difference between the method of ART, serum steroid levels on the day of SCG administration, fertilization rate, and the number of retrieved oocytes, mature oocytes, days of gonadotropin injections, and pregnancy. So we have found that the incidence of OHS in the carbadolen treated group was significantly lower than that in the control group, 11% versus 33%. To conclude, I say the present study showed that carbadolen did reduce the incidence of OHSS and the risk of hospitalization due to lower occurrence of OHSS. Carbadolen might be a valuable drug for the prevention and treatment of the abnormality. However, randomized control trials are required to study the efficacy as well as safety of different doses and durations of carbadolen administration for both prophylactic and therapeutic purposes. Thank you.